Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. My name's Gab, and joining me today I've got Jeri and Krebs. We're from a bunch of Inner West churches, and we're really glad you could come and join us this Good Friday to celebrate the death of Jesus Christ. With all of the changes happening in our lives around COVID-19, with things being shut down and having to remain in self-isolation, it can feel really strange to be celebrating someone's death. Because ultimately all of these changes are all about preserving life and preventing death. And so this Good Friday, I think it's worth us taking time to think about the nature of death and Jesus' death. So Jeri, doesn't God care about death?
I think he does care about death. I think he cares deeply about death. When I think about Genesis 3 and what happened in the garden and when sin entered the world, that's also when death entered the world. And I think of death as the catalyst for the whole Bible story, maybe the catalyst for our whole history. Death was a problem then, and it is now, but it was also a solution to something. God introduced death into the world because of sin. Sin means that we hurt each other, we hurt God, and if there was no death, we would do that forever. And it's a bit hard to think about, conceptually, but I really think death is a harsh kind of mercy from God, that there is a way out, that he made possible, through death, only through death, he made possible a different reality after death. So that's kind of how I think about it. What about you, Krebs?
Yeah, I think if God didn't care about death, he wouldn't do something about it. We wouldn't have this celebration on this day, Good Friday. And I think it would be fully within God's right to just leave us to die, to do nothing about it. And I think we understand that death isn't how it's meant to be. There's this real sadness and grief that comes with losing someone that you know or close to. And I think that really points to the fact that this is not what is meant to happen, that this is not right in a way. And I think that does God care about death? I think we do see him really care about death because he wants to save the world from death. He wants to bring it back into life. And we see Jesus, the Son of God, God and man together, weeping over one of his friends' death in John 11. If God didn't care about death, he wouldn't cry about that. He wouldn't be upset. He wouldn't go do something about it.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason we're all feeling some kind of way right now. Death has been raised in our consciousness together as a society, right? As we're waiting through this pandemic, we are faced with our own mortality, the mortality of people we love, maybe grandparents. And I think there's a reason we're all suddenly feeling a little bit more anxious. I think in the Western world especially, we think we're young, we're indestructible, we're in control, we've got this. We don't ever think about death in any serious kind of way. So a kind of weird prayer that I've had is that our culture has a kind of existential crisis through and after this pandemic. I really hope that we really understand how mortal we are and how much we need God. We weren't meant to live without him or ignoring him. And that means coming to face with death.
Yeah, I love what you're picking up on there, Jeri, just how in our face death is right now. And so I guess with that in mind, it's pretty easy to wonder, why did Jesus have to die? Surely there's another way, right?
Yeah, I think, if we believe that there's a God and he can do everything, then surely there is another way, right? It is very within the realm of God to deem another way possible and make that happen. And I think what's so beautiful about Jesus dying on the cross for us is that it wasn't necessary for him to do that, but he chose willingly to do that. And in that he shows us love. He talks about there is no greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for their friends. And so in that, Jesus is calling all of us in the world, through all time and all space, his friends, ones that he loves, ones that he cares for, ones that he wants to lay down his life so that we might have life with him if our faith is in him.
Yeah, Jesus didn't have to die. That's a really good point. When I think of the cross, I really think of two things meeting. I think of justice, and I think you've touched on this. I think of mercy coming together. Our God is a just God. He's a good judge. So I think of myself in a courtroom. I've come before him with my life and everything I've done, the way I've hurt and harmed the people around me, myself, God. And God looks at my rap sheet and there's a clear consequence for what I've done. And the only way that he is a just God is if I pay that consequence. And then Jesus comes in and he says, no, I will pay this consequence on her behalf. And it's this really incredible way in which God meets his perfect justice, but is also overwhelmingly merciful and kind towards us, that we don't have to do that. So I guess the real injustice is that we didn't do it.
Yeah,
Jesus did it.
sure.
And he was innocent, he was God, he was powerful, and yet he chose to do that.
Yeah, that is so good. I love what you're picking up on, how Jesus didn't have to die, but the other alternative is we all die for our own sin. That's really helpful for putting things in perspective. And so I guess just to wrap up for us today, just some reflections. Why is Good Friday so good? What makes Jesus' death good?
It's like, why isn't it good, you know? Like we talked about before, that Jesus willingly laid down his life for his friends, for us. That's so beautiful. That's astoundingly beautiful and wonderful and good. I think what makes it even better is that it wasn't this meaningless death. Like we will celebrate in a couple of days, Jesus didn't stay dead, he rose again. And so it just increases that level of goodness and wonderfulness and beautifulness and all the nesses to how awesome it is. And I think just thinking about that, and then thinking about how undeserving of this I am, how broken and sinful I am, it's just like, how can there be such a thing or such a person that would love me that much to do that for me? And it just really breaks me, but makes me feel really loved and known at the same time. That God would willingly love me, a sinner, so that I might be his friend, that I might be his child again. And so for me, that's good news.
Yeah, I think it's overwhelmingly good. And I think it's right to make us emotional, to break us a little bit. I think it's also good because death is coming for us. I think if we were to continue to live in this world in which, our earth is melting and we're at war and we're just hurting and hurting each other, if we really look into the brokenness of this world, I'm really thankful that there's an end. And that's also why Good Friday is good to me, that there's an eternity that comes after, something that Jesus made way for on Sunday. And that gives me hope in this world. That's why it's so good. It means that this life I live is just a little while. And though the wages of sin are death, like Romans said, Jesus has paid it all for me. And I can live knowing that his good death means an eternity with him and with each other.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your reflections, Jeri and Krebs. That was awesome. And for you guys at home, be sure to check out our Easter Sunday broadcast in a couple of days. But also, if our chat today has brought something up for you, and maybe there's some questions in your mind or something you want to follow up on, I really encourage you to have a conversation around that. But until then, we'll catch you around.
Cool. Thanks for watching the video. We are Inner West Youth. If you want to see more content from us, we have an Instagram. It's @InnerWestYouth, and we have a YouTube channel as well. I know what the YouTube channel is. What's the YouTube channel? We don't know what the YouTube channel is, but probably you're watching this video on it right now, so you're right there.